Hey, 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 party people. It's Brandi and Cesley, and we're back with the Blooming Through Faith, the podcast that helps you grow and bloom in your mindset, lifestyle, health, and wealth. We want you to know that you are capable, beautiful, and worthy. Make sure to follow, subscribe, and leave a rating on the podcast so more people can find and listen. Today, we are going to talk about the 4 F's, and I am not talking about my favorite F word. Cicely's like this girl. Okay, so the last podcast I actually cussed in. I'm going to do good
I
today.
know.
All right, we are going to talk about fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And Cecily's actually going to kick us off today.
Yes. So this is a topic that I am actually really passionate about. When I was talking to Brandi about this topic, she was like, "What? What are you talking about?" But once we started having the
That is
conversation,
a lie. I knew what you were talking about 100%. I just
what?
have never heard of fawn.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk about it today.
Well, we're going to talk about it. Yeah. So these are the physiological changes that your bodies go through when they are introduced to stress. So these are acute stress responses. So here's the deal. Stress can come from so many different places, spaces, people that you might not even realize that you do one of these things. So this is a really great podcast to listen to. If you're like, what the heck are they even talking about? Just keep on listening. We're going to explain it. Okay. If you've ever experienced any sort of trauma, been in a bad relationship with anyone, so not even like a spouse or significant other, like bad friendships, bad childhood, bad work relationships. Like we don't talk about that a lot, but like a boss to employee work relationship, all of these things can have affect the behaviors that you pick up subconsciously to protect yourself from harm. So people can respond this way to situations, even when they're stressed out or anxious about anything. So like even if you're not in a dangerous situation, these are physiological responses that you can have to, like, if you are scared of public speaking, job interviews, parenting sometimes can bring this stress on. Relationship stressors can trigger these stress responses. Especially if you've experienced any sort of trauma in the past, your acute stress response has become overactive and really responds to these things that remind us of previous events. And we really tend to interpret it as threatening. So the 4 that we're going to talk about is you generally, when you are presented with a perceived danger, so perceived, so it might not actually be a dangerous situation, but maybe it triggers something in you from a past experience. Maybe it's that it's dangerous for you in a sense that it's stressful. Your body can tell that this is a dangerous experience for you. We do 4 things. We will either fight, so we will face any perceived threat aggressively. We will flight, so that means we will just take off and run away from the danger. We will freeze, which means we're just totally unable to move or act against this perceived danger. Or we will fawn, which means we will try to immediately act in like a pleasing way. All my people pleasers, this is going to be yours, okay? We try to avoid the conflict. All right. So once we know what our habits are, we can become more present people. We can become people who love life and love others better. We can become people who are running towards our goals without a lot of this emotional baggage holding us back. We let self-imposed dangers, a lot of times thoughts in our own heads, hold us back from being able to achieve so much. And God has such a big purpose for you that today we really want to learn to treat ourselves with a little bit more love and grace. So we're just going to roll straight into the first one. We're going to talk about each of these responses that we have, these habits that we pick up, and then we're going to talk about tips on each one as we roll through them and how to kind of overcome them. So the first one is fight. You are going to experience a fight response if you are someone who is faced with a considerable amount of stress in your daily life. Generally, you get a rush of adrenaline. That feeling you get when someone fights with you or presents you with something scary, those butterflies when you're about to have to public speak, or even maybe it's just like ordering food on the telephone or like ordering room service. That can be stressful. Like some people get really overwhelmed by stuff like that. Okay. So like if these are things that you notice your stomach gets all like butterfly giggly about, if you believe that you have the power to fight, your body will release these hormones to prepare you for battle. So this is a fight response. If you have a fight response, you are going to be someone who, when you're perceived with danger, even in like an overwhelming amount of work, maybe it's your kids are being overwhelming for you today, you're going to be a screamer. You're going to be someone who cries. You're going to have the urge to scream when overwhelmed. You're going to be defensive. Maybe it's your spouse telling you, hey, you're doing this wrong, or this is not working, and you snap at them. Examples of this could be like if you have any friends, or even if you lash out under pressure. I have a friend who, well, I had a friend who used to do this all the time. And for me, it was so triggering. So every time you would have a conversation with them about something that was critical, or like, hey, girl, I love you so much, this is a little out of character for you, she would blow up like an atomic bomb. Like, I'm telling you, like, it was like Hiroshima, worst ever. And you could not have a conversation with her. That is that fight response. So if any of this is triggering you in any way, if you're listening to this driving down the road going, oh, I do that when I'm stressed out, like, what is your response when you are stressed out? If it is any of those things I just talked about, blaming others, having a grudge against others, aggression, crying, screaming, any of these things, then these are some tips for you. These are some things I want you to try and do when you feel that fight response coming on to stress. So one, we're going to accept what we can't control, right? We're going to realize that like we cannot control other people's actions. The biggest thing with the fight response is that we are trying to control the situation that is stressing us out. And at the end of the day, a lot of times it's totally out of our control. So accept what you cannot control. Another really great tip when you're feeling this kind of fight response coming on where you want to lash out at others is to talk it out in your head. So instead of having this conversation, this is going to sound strange, but instead of having this conversation out loud with other people, have a whole conversation in your head. Talk to yourself, boo. It's okay. Like, I do it all the time. And this is not even actually, I'm not a fighter, but for me, if I know that I'm feisty about a conversation, I will have the whole conversation in my head first. And if it doesn't go the way that I would like it to go, if it doesn't really seem like, wow, I'm having a kind conversation in my head and it really, I'm going off on someone, then I think, okay, maybe I don't need to have this conversation. Maybe I need to take a step back and realize that I am heated, I am overwhelmed, and I need to notice my pattern. So make sure that you're noticing your pattern. If you're a fighter, know that you're a fighter and know that it's not good to step into the ring when you are feeling overwhelmed. You need to remove yourself a little bit. Other really great tips are practicing intentional breathing. So when you start to notice yourself getting overwhelmed, there's too much on your plate, try to go for a walk, try to get some intentional breathing in. Also, if you are someone who is triggered by this fight response, you need to make sure that you are getting advice from other people, okay? Because your mindset is already in a place of aggression. You've got to be making sure that you have those lifelines and support people that you can call. Like, I could call Brandi and say, hey, let me tell you what's got me heated. And she'll probably say, well, you're actually wrong in this. So you might want to take a step back and like chill out a little bit. Okay. Or I might be right and she'll totally validate me. But most of the time, like, find someone who's going to give you really honest, great feedback and have you help you assess all points of view.
I love that, Cecily. And that's a great point when you're talking about friendship. So let's talk about friendship for 1 second, okay? So fight isn't mine either, but I resonated with a few of those things that I do as well. A true friend will put you in your place. A true friend doesn't just agree with you, right? A true friend is going to say, hey, babe, I love you, but let's look at it this way. Hey, babe, I see where you're coming from, but X, Y, and Z. And that's how Cecily and I are. We are very, very transparent with each other and honest with each other because we want to help each other and we want to see each other grow, right? We aren't in a fake friendship to where we're going to be like, yes, girl, absolutely, you're perfect, like X, Y, and Z, even though I do think Cecily's perfect. But sometimes. But just look at your friendships too. Like, who actually tells you how it is, and don't get your feelings hurt. Take that feedback and know that they just want to help you. The next thing that Cecily said is something that I had to work on was just not responding to things so quickly. You know, taking a second. Like, if you look at a text message and you're like, and I used to do this all the time, even in business, and it was so unprofessional as a leader, I'd be like, because it was my own insecurities and I've grown, but I'd be like, excuse me, and then I would regret my message. So take a step back, give it some time, think about it, talk about it to yourself in your head, like Cecily said, or talk about it out loud. Talk to yourself if nobody's around, play it out. You will thank us later. Do not be quick to respond. And then the last thing that I wanted to say is maybe this is Mitch's because he can't order room service ever. Like, I'm like, just pick the phone.
So strange. There's really strange things that go along with this these responses that we have. Like, you can get overwhelmed my husband does it too. He gets so overwhelmed ordering something or going somewhere new. If I ask him to go in and like pay for something, he's like, who do I talk to? What desk do I go to? I'm like, I don't ask somebody. I don't know.
Oh my gosh, I love it. They're so similar. All right, we're going to jump into F number 2, flight. And this is actually mine. This is my trauma response. Okay, so if you're getting feelings of anxiety, shallow breathing, darting eyes, inability to focus, maybe restless movements, you're fidgeting a lot, feeling trapped, feeling tense, that's a thing for me. I do not like to feel trapped, all right? Hence why I don't have a 9 to 5, all right? And I don't like elevators. Did you know that, Cecily? I'm not a huge fan of elevators.
No,
Anyway,
but my son doesn't either.
No, maybe it's his too. Habit of multitasking to a detriment. So not in a successful way, like constantly doing numerous things, not being, and we talked about that before, right? Some things maybe you can multitask, some things you're not going to be as great at if you're doing both things, right? Jumping from task to task as if it feels like it's heavy, needing to get out of your current situation or space, leaving the massive to-do list and going on a vacation suddenly, frequent day trips to kind of zone out, shopping sprees, not communicating plans to people. All right. So if any of this sounds like you, for example, if you get overwhelmed, you have that to-do list and you get overwhelmed and you're like, I can't even focus. Like you try to do this thing, you try to do that thing, and you're like, you know what? I'm just not going to do anything. And you leave. Might be you. When I was reading over these things, I was like, oh my gosh, shopping spree? Yes. That is 100% me. Should I be like spending money? Should I be? No, but it made me feel better. I don't know why. Now I do. I will say, we're going to talk about, so if any of those resonated in you, then flight might be your trauma response. We're going to talk about how to combat it and some tips and tricks. I will say my therapist gave me a great, and if my husband's listening, he's like, oh yeah, she likes to run. She's a runner. Like
she's a runner.
Listen, hands down, the beginning of our relationship, I was like, okay, bye. Okay, do this. Okay, I got my own apartment. Okay, we're done. Like that, it's so crazy, but that's my response. So now being married with kids, guess what I can't do? I can't just run. I can't do it. So a great tip that my therapist gave me was what other things calm you down, right? So I will get into a shower. I will get into the bath, like water calms me down. So that's another way versus, just leaving my family because I'm not going to do that.
Just then piecing out. I mean, okay. People do it all the time.
They do. And it's hard not to. Okay. Yep. Not my boy. If Mitch makes me mad, I'm just gonna be like, okay, bye. Like I'm 15 again. Like 2 adults don't need you. And I'm like, well, no, you're married, Brandi, grow up. You can't leave your husband. All right. Some other ways. Challenge yourself to make a list of your top 3 priorities. So we've talked about this before, right? So it's ironic that I figured this out, right? So I have numerous to-do lists. So make sure each morning you are writing your top priorities. If you only finish those 3, you are feeling less stress, less pressure. You are feeling accomplished, right? Get rid of distractions like social media. Put your phone on do not disturb. This has been a game changer for me. If my phone is not on do not disturb, I'm constantly on it, checking messages, getting back to people. Again, a trauma response is like, I feel like I have to get back to somebody ASAP. And that's not the truth. Everybody's living their life. Let's see, what are some other things? Think about what can you take off your mind and your plate at that moment and then come back to later, right? Communicate feelings with your friends and family. Give everybody like a heads up. That's been a game changer for me too, right? So if I'm starting to feel anxious or overwhelmed, I'm like, hey, to my team, I'm like, hey, I'm not going to be available for the rest of the day. My family members, like I'm unplugging, and that has been so beneficial. So just communicate and setting those boundaries, right? Prioritize rest. If you are a flight response, you probably aren't resting as much as you should be, right? So prioritize boundaries, resting. Maybe choose a place to go to that fills your cup. that calms you down, right? Whether that be going to the beach, which is mine, going on a hike, going to a coffee shop. Sometimes getting out of the house, if you're used to working from home, you'll get more done, right? So maybe take your laptop, go to a coffee shop. I don't know. It works. So there are some ways to combat that if that is your trauma response.
Yeah. And I love what you said about getting out of the house and getting out of your space, what that your therapist talked to you about just finding things that you really love to do. Because the thing is like, we're not telling you don't go on vacation, but generally people that have this flight response, they will work until they are so overwhelmed and feeling underwater that then they just peace out. And then they're out in an, I don't want to say in an irresponsible way, but it can feel really irresponsible. Like you're supposed to be enjoying yourself on vacations, things like this. But when we wait till we're so stressed out to where it's an escape for us, it's because we're leaving this like perceived dangerous situation. And when I say danger, I don't mean like, you're about to die.
Right.
Could be. That's usually where the trauma responses come from, is because in the past you have felt threatened. But now it can even be so much as like you're so stressed out that you just dip out because you have to just drop it all to save yourself. That's very much how it feels. It feels like I have to drop all of this right now to save myself, or I will, I don't know, lose my mind. I will die. I will lose my mind. I will freak out. I cannot do this. So this probably resonates with a lot of women, which is why I love that we're focusing on this, because most women probably go through many periods of the day, of the week, where they're like, I can't do this. And I promise you that if you can really start to identify, oh, here's why I actually do this, then you can get to a place where you can plan those days. Like Brandi's really good about, and not even with just your coworkers and your spouse and your family, but even with your friends, like just because you love your friends and you love spending time with them, they can, when you're compiling all of that on top of each other, it can still feel very overwhelming to communicate with people that you love. So even telling your friends like, hey, I'm going to be out of pocket for this whole day. I'm going to get a massage. That's a great thing to talk to everybody about, so everybody knows your boundaries. Just the other day, I had to, somebody was asking me for some email, right? Like seems like a simple thing to do, but I had so many things on my plate that felt really overwhelming. Like that sounds silly, but that sending that one email was going to literally push me over the edge to murder somebody. So I literally had to text them back and go, I'm so sorry. I am not in a place where I can do that today or tomorrow, but Thursday I will get that out to you. And I had to set that expectation and be like, I know that, because for someone else, they're like, oh, it's going to take you 5 minutes. But what they don't realize is the mental capacity that it takes to stop what you're doing, add something else, stop your momentum. And so it's okay to plan these things for yourself, especially if you know you're a flight person. Stop, plan, take care of yourself. Cool.
Love it.
Let's go on to number 3, freeze. And the reason I'm talking about this is because I'm a freezer. Okay. That is my trauma response.
Wait,
I'm like,
I'm a freezer. I think about a refrigerator when you say that. I'm a freezer.
freezer. Okay. Listen, it's not my favorite F word. However, Brandi can tell you this too, because we've been friends for years. I used to go ghost on her to the point where she would message me like 2-3 times and go, where the hell are you?
I just give her like little eyeballs.
Yeah.
Eyeballs. Like,
So
are
she
you
knows
okay?
exactly what
Hello?
I'm doing. That's the thing, is you're not tricky. Like when you're a freeze of person, like you're not tricking anyone by ghosting. They know that you're avoiding them, but sometimes it's just too much. So I thought it was really interesting. A 2017 article on freezing correlates freezing as a dissociation behavior. So really you're just disassociating yourself from everything. So freezing is a way that we cope with being overburdened. And like basically if we feel like we can't handle life at the moment, we will freeze, which means like, have you ever been in the middle of a big mess? Like, you know, they say don't cry over spilled milk. A freezer will walk away from the spilled milk. They will just walk away.
You would just leave it there?
They will just leave it for a second. I'll come back and clean it. But like if it's a massive mess and I look at it, I'm like, I just cannot. Nothing else comes in the brain. And that's the thing you have to understand, is like your brain literally freezes up. So this might look like zoning out, right? If you get really overwhelmed and that's the day that you binge watch 12 episodes of something, never mind the to-do list. You're not doing one thing on the to-do list. You're not doing 10 things on the to-do list. you're
I have
out.
to stop you, and this is nothing to do with this, but you're doing so great. It has everything to do with the other episode that we talked about with Real Housewives. So, you know how I gave myself like 2 days that I would be, binge? So I went into a Real Housewives Miami binge, and I can't do it anymore. They are so mean. They are so
Yeah.
mean. They
See?
attacked this one girl. Oh my God.
Yeah,
She didn't even
they
do
did.
anything wrong. Like, they literally got outed, and the other girl was like, listen, it wasn't her. It was X, Y, and Z. She's like, it was me. It wasn't the other girl. They're like, well, I still
Oh,
think
at
it
the
was.
mom brunch? Yeah.
Yes. And
Yeah,
I like
saw that.
Nicole.
Yeah.
Anyway, I can't watch it anymore, friends, because I have anxiety of how that girl was treated, and it breaks my heart. Alexia is so mean.
If you haven't seen the episodes, this is a quick plug for Real Housewives of Miami. Yes. They are really mean. They are fighters. They felt that's a really great example. These women
There
on
we
this,
go.
most women on reality shows are fighters. So they feel attacked and they're like pit bulls. I don't even like using that example actually, because I have a pit bull and she's the sweetest. They're like tigers.
There you go. I like it.
All right. So here's what you do. If you're a freezer, if this sounds like you, if everything I said resonated with you, if you're someone who they're overwhelmed, they just stop answering messages. And this is also good to know if you know somebody who is a freezer. If you're listening to all this and you're like, oh man, my friend is like that. My mom is like that. My husband is like that. Like, this is great for you to know, because then you don't have to treat them. Don't get offended when they ignore you. Don't get worried. Don't stress out, right? This is also a great moment to like give people grace when they have these moments. So if you are somebody that freezes when you're experiencing trauma, when you're really held to the fire, I want you to try going for a walk, because that can kind of help you get out of the freezing moment, right? Because in the moment you feel really overwhelmed. If you can take 10 minutes to allow your adrenal system to calm down, get some endorphins pumping, right? Get those happy hormones up, then you're going to be able to see things with a level and clear head. So try going for a walk, pick one thing to focus on, force yourself, because in the moment, again, your adrenaline is high. You're not going to want to think about anything that you have to do. Pick one thing to focus on. All right. I want you to try grounding techniques. This is a really easy thing to just Google because there are so many of them. But grounding techniques are something like it's a technique that will help bring you back down to earth from your current situation. So even something like thinking about places you would go on vacation, just start naming them out loud. Think about groceries that are in your fridge. Just start naming them out loud. This sounds really silly, but just keeping your mind on something else will allow you to kind of come back down from that high adrenaline place. Make sure that you're using life-giving affirmations. So if you are someone who freezes, it's because you feel like you can't handle everything that's on your plate. So constantly be telling yourself, and we talk about affirmations all the time, but constantly be telling yourself, you absolutely can do this. You don't have to hide. You can answer this person. You will not disappoint them if you cannot do all of these things. This is an important one. Communicate with people when you're feeling overwhelmed and tell them the space that you need. The email is a good example, right? I texted the person who was trying to get a hold of me and I said, listen, I have a lot on my plate over these next couple of days. I will not get back to you till Thursday. I was very specific about the space that I needed. Also, if you're having a day where you're feeling overwhelmed and you're wanting to freeze and it's not possible for you, you're like, I cannot retreat right now. Create an hourly calendar. So literally hour by hour. What am I doing for the next hour? And then what am I doing for the next? Because then you're really kind of taking away everything that's overwhelming you and just focusing on the minute by minute moment. And you can survive minute by minute. You can survive the next minute. You can survive the next hour, even if you are in the most traumatic of situations. When I was in a high risk relationship that was very dangerous for me, I survived hour by hour. And I would just say, okay, for the next hour, I'm okay. And so it's okay to go back to that and just lovingly hold yourself accountable.
I love that. That's wonderful. The minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day. All right, so we're going to talk about the fourth F, okay? The one that I was unaware of on this topic. It is called fawn. Fawning. All right, let's talk about some people-pleasing behaviors, all right?
Mm-hmm.
So fawning is a response marked by people-pleasing behaviors, conflict avoidance, unable to find one's voice, or ability to stand up for themselves in the face of threat, and taking care of the needs of others to their own detriment, okay? So maybe something happens uncomfortable in a group and you just kind of shy away. You don't say anything. You feel in your gut that something is wrong, but you're not able to voice your opinion, right? You're not able to stand up for yourself. You care more about taking care of other people to your own detriment than taking care of yourself. That's a big one. Trauma as children can lead to fawning a lot in situations. You can become agreeable to avoid conflict, leading to even more stress being piled on you. I mean, this one is just kind of like, it's honestly just reading about it. It's just so powerful, right? It's just being like, I'm not going to stand up for myself. I'm just going to kind of move back. I'm going to, do you want to talk about fawning a little bit? Because
I think we all step into fawning a little bit sometimes.
so
even
too.
if one of the other things feels like it resonates more with you, I think that fawning is something that we all have a habit of doing, especially because nobody likes conflict, right? Nobody
Yep.
likes to be yelled at, nobody likes conflict. And so when you're in a situation where you fear someone will either be disappointed in you, when you fear that someone will be confrontational with you, we tend to, even the strongest people will tend to just shy away and be like, well, okay, maybe you're right. Maybe your way of doing things is better. And that's why it's so important to recognize when you're doing this and really grow in. One of the biggest reasons why we host this podcast is so that other women, so that you guys can grow in confidence in who you are, because you won't even realize that you fawn and people please to the point of giving up your own ideas, your own thoughts. Imagine being in a meeting with somebody, even just in a conversation with your spouse, and you're like, well, I don't want this to lead to a fight right now. We're having a lovely evening, so I'll just agree with what they say. And you don't even realize that you're giving up your values and your thoughts.
Own identity, right?
Yeah,
You're giving
your
up
identity.
who you
Thank
are.
you. That's what I was trying to say. 100%. Yeah. So it's really important to like know these triggers and really realize it, because it's a really big one that most of us do. Even if we identify with the other three most of the time, I promise you there is somebody in your life that you practice these fawning behaviors with.
Oh, for sure. And I would even say, for me, I know there was a time where I was with Mitch. So I've gone through a lot of therapy. Okay. So anybody who's known me in my teens or my 20s and have seen that little ratchet side of me, you're welcome. You don't have to see anymore. I don't scream anymore. Anyway, but I would always stand up for myself. I would X, Y, and Z. And then I went through a time and a space where I just didn't. Now, with my relationship with Mitch, right? We communicate, whether it's, communication is key when it comes to relationships. If you're not feeling comfortable, or you don't agree with, just have that conversation. Like, I'm obsessed with my husband. We have a great relationship. I don't always agree with how he, decides to talk to Troy or reprimand Troy. And sometimes I don't agree with him, but I don't say it in front of Troy. I'll wait.
Yeah.
And then him and I will have a conversation later and say, hey, this could have been handled X, Y, and Z. And he will agree or disagree, or we'll have that conversation. But it's important because it's how we raise our children, right? So like Cecily was saying, if this is happening with your spouse, it is important to stand up. It is important to speak your truth. Okay. Let's talk about some tips. First off, know the triggers and realize when you're exhibiting this behavior, okay? Learn to say no. No is a word. Yes, you can say no. You're not going to lose people over saying the word no. What you will probably do is find yourself. You'll probably have a healthier, happier life when you learn to set those boundaries and you learn to say no.
And to add to that, learn to say no without giving an excuse, because the problem is we say no, and then a lot of times it's followed with, I'm so sorry, I would if I could, and we explain ourselves. It is okay. It is your life. It is your boundary. And I know it's hard. And the first few times you do this, you are going to get those little jittery butterflies in your stomach because you're going to get nervous. But it's totally okay to say, no, I'm not available for that. But thank you so much for asking me. I really appreciate it. And that's it. No excuse. Nobody needs to know why you say no.
We always say no, but like you just said, or that word sorry, that women say all the time. I'm sorry.
Stop apologizing for yourself.
Stop apologizing. There's no need to apologize. You can't show up to a birthday party. Don't apologize. You just can't be there. It's not a big deal. Stop saying sorry. Start saying no. Set those boundaries and then have those conversations. So it might be uncomfortable to speak your truth, right? But just clearly reach out to that person and say, I want to share my opinion with you because X, Y, and Z, right?
Yeah.
So practice doing that more. In all of these different trauma responses are things our bodies have trained to do to keep us safe. Okay. So remember, you are worthy of being the best version of yourself. And that means taking care of yourself like someone you love.
Mm-hmm. Knowing that what triggers you is the best step in knowing yourself and moving closer to who God created you to be. You can fight against it by having a place that always feels safe. Maybe it's your home, your bedroom, your office, your backyard. Maybe it's going on a walk, but find a place that makes you feel safe all the time. Make sure that you're eating nutritious meals, drinking enough water, taking breaks. These are all things that we've talked about before, but these are all things that will help regulate your nervous system so that you're not just jumping to these places of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. All right. Make sure that you're connecting with others, getting enough sleep, making time for the things that you love. Y'all learn to say no. Learn to feel like you are somebody that is worthy of taking care of, and surround yourself with people who know you well enough to give you grace and navigate during these times with you when you get triggered. We have some homework for you guys. We want you to make sure that you go back through this podcast if you weren't able to take notes and figure out which one of these is your trigger response. And then write down the tips for that response to practice this week. Maybe you put it in your phone. Maybe you put it on a notepad that is with you all the time, but recognize when these things are coming up and then do your best to fight against it.
I love that, Cecily. I always love the homework. And reach out to us. That's our favorite. When we hear from you guys after an episode with something that resonated with you or that you've done the homework, we love hearing from you. And our Instagram is up now. So if you don't want to message us privately, you can message us on our Instagram, which is at blooming.through.faith. All right. And remember, you're worthy, you're capable, you're beautiful, and we can't wait to watch you grow, girl.